think one of the interesting things about starting companies is to start something that you wish existed in the world, that you wish you could pay money to, that doesn't currently, right? And so my last year at GitHub, I worked out of Paris, and I was trying to learn French. And as an adult with limited time, trying to learn a new language, I think I ran into all of the different problems of trying to learn a new language. And that became a really interesting problem set for me, right? I think what is interesting to me personally, there's different things that entrepreneurs go into business for that they find compelling. And the one for me is a really big industry that has a lot of competitors, but in a market that none of them serve very well, right? And so I think GitHub was like that for me, where there were tons and tons of version control systems and large companies that were trying to help mostly sell into that space and didn't do it very well, right? And so GitHub came in and found and created a solution that was good for the users, for the developers, and I saw the same sort of niche. There's tons and tons of people that want to learn a new language. It's incredibly difficult to do, and nobody's serving the community well. So of all of the things that I could do, I felt like, A, this was something I wanted to do. I wanted to learn other languages, and I always found it very difficult. And I saw everyone else that was in this space finding it difficult as well, even with all of the competition that was there.
So Scott came up with the idea, and I was sort of looking for what I wanted to do next and playing around with some ideas. And as I was looking for things, there were two sort of filters that I had when I was evaluating ideas. One of them was, what are some ideas that could potentially lead to the creation of 1 million jobs? Okay, that is a good filter. Each finger stands for a million. 1 million jobs. The other, Liz finds my joke funny. The other question was, what are some good ways for people to make money on the internet? And if you think about it, what are ways that a traditionally considered unskilled person that can make money on the internet? There's really not that many. So these were two questions. And so Scott came to me with this idea, and he said, hey, I have this idea for language learning, and we can use tutors to help people learn a language, but we can also leverage it by having self-study done on the computer. And these two things combined is what had kind of worked for him when he started trying everything that there was around to learn French. And so I ran the idea against these two filters I was using, and it was surprising that it met both of them. So the idea behind Chatterbug being, you can put really anyone to work being a language tutor by giving them a platform that they can then use to become effective language instructors. And all they need is the skill that they already have and already have thousands of hours of practice in. And that's the ability to speak their native language. But without a platform, it's very difficult for people to market that skill, to turn that into a skill that people will pay you money for. And so that's one criteria that it met. The other one is, how do you make money on the internet? And with language learning, because there's people out there that really want to learn languages and are willing to pay real money to learn languages, that means if you create a platform and you connect them, now you have the ability to pay language tutors a reasonable wage. And we're very happy to be able to say that we can do that. And so with those two criteria met, and with Scott being Scott, I said, yeah, let's do this.
I studied linguistics. I'd always been interested in language learning, and I actually wrote my thesis on multiple language acquisition. So this is something that I've always been interested in, how people learn multiple languages and what are the best ways to learn a second and third language, what it looks like when people grow up bi and trilingual. So it's been sort of a lifelong interest for me. And I kind of left the linguistics part of my background behind. But when I got to GitHub, Scott and I would actually travel quite a bit for conferences or press tours, like when GitHub launched in Japan. And every time we went to a country that spoke a different language than English, Scott would always try to learn at least enough of the language to be able to introduce himself and introduce GitHub. I've seen him speak Japanese to Japanese press, French, now German, Spanish, and I thought that was really impressive. And we'd have talks a lot of times when we were between meetings about how he did it and what tools he was using and what was out there, and could we build something better. So after Scott left GitHub and started thinking about this idea for a new language learning platform, and we're recruited Tom to join, and one day we were having lunch and he told me about what he was doing, and I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. You know what would be really cool is if you had someone with like a communications background maybe working for this. And he's like, funny, I was just thinking that would be cool. So yeah, it was great. For me, it's really like a dream come true to be able to go back to my passion, and to be able to build a company that's really centered on this, and that's also super tech forward. I love that.
I'm very curious to hear why people who are so deeply rooted in the Bay Area ecosystem, the natural thing for you would be start another company there. Why are you here? Like, why do this here? What's the attractive piece about this?
It's the beautiful Berlin winters, I think.
It's true for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there are two major factors, maybe three. I think one of the biggest things is that Berlin is one of the most international cities in the world, right? Or at least in Europe, where what we were really looking for, like Liz was saying, is that we have a lot of didactics experts, right? A lot of teachers, a lot of people that speak lots of other languages in the target languages that we were trying to build out at first. And because of the makeup of Europe, there are a lot of people who are moving around within Europe and have a really strong need to learn another language. In the United States, that's not really the case. I mean, throughout all of the Americas, that's not really the case, right? Because everywhere speaks Spanish, except for the United States, who doesn't want to speak anything but English. And so the need to learn another language is, I think, much less prevalent, much less interesting than in Europe. And in Europe, it is a very interesting use case in a more concentrated way. And in Berlin, I don't remember, I read a statistic at some point that 30 or 40% of Berlin were expats. Like, there's just a lot of non-Berliners in Berlin. And so that makes it very interesting. It makes it very easy, I think, both to find teachers of other languages and to find people that are experts at teaching people and teaching people other languages, I should say, and to be able to craft curriculum that way. And in San Francisco, for example, you won't find that, right? It's much, much more difficult, I think. And so I think for us, Berlin made much more sense.
Everybody's here. It's just this great melting pot of amazing people that come here to pursue something. And it feels to me like a little bit of a prototype maybe of what, part of the United States looked like at some point. And early in the technology industry, it looks here maybe like a little bit of what San Francisco looked like 30 years ago, where you get people that come together and they're able to do something, and it's cheap enough that you can actually rent space and you can get it done on a startup budget, and that's no longer true in San Francisco. I don't know how anyone starts a company in San Francisco anymore. The costs are prohibitive, and it makes life less enjoyable in a kind of a way of starting a company. And here, like, the magic remains. Like, it's the beginning of the journey of Berlin as kind of a technology hub, as a startup hub. And I always love being early on things. And Berlin, to me, feels like it's early on that kind of startup incubator, startup mentality journey.
What I have seen is that people here, and maybe this is Europe in general, have a much healthier work-life balance than I've seen in San Francisco, and I actually think that makes the company a lot better in a lot of ways. That when people have a healthier perspective about work and then time away from work, that they're a lot more efficient and effective at building things and at building things that people really enjoy using. So I don't know, I would never say that I've experienced a lack of ambition in Berlin. Like, everyone that I meet is usually super passionate about whatever it is that they're working on. And it's not just tech, which is something different than San Francisco. Like, teachers can actually afford to live in the city, which means that we can hire amazing teachers to build our curriculum. So I think that that's wonderful.
Yeah, I've always believed that a company is made of people, which I think we can all agree is true. And if that's true, then how you run your company is really about how you treat your people. And I think that the reason that people come together to create something is because you believe in the same thing, but also because this is how you spend your time. And there's no sense in building something if your only goal is the exploitation of other human beings. It's just not a worthy pursuit to me. And so GitHub was created, and Chatterbug now also is created with the idea that we can create something that people actually like to work for. And if we all do that together, and if we all are enjoying what we're doing, then it barely feels like work at all. And if that's the case, then people who are very happy to work for a company and feel like they're taken care of when it comes to health and the ability to take time off and the flexibility to work from home so that you can be there when your internet guy shows up 6 months after you move in, then we're all in this together, and people that are happy build better stuff. And so that was always the thesis at GitHub, and I'm very happy to say that I think we're replicating that as well at Chatterbug. This is really important to me. It's extremely uninteresting to me to burn people out for the sake of building something. If the people that are building it are not participating in the joy of building it, then you're doing something very, very wrong. Because at the end of the day, when your life is over and you're looking back at it, what is the measure of what you've accomplished? I think the biggest element of what you've accomplished is how your life has impacted other people's lives. And if it's only impacted other people's lives negatively, then you haven't lived much of a life at all.
When we were starting GitHub, we had never started a company before. I mean, Tom had some smaller companies before. I had never helped start a company before. All of the co-founders had not, and didn't know each other super well, I think. And so I think we've been able to avoid a lot of that growing pains wise, just having, built a company. I mean, Tom and I were both there from sort of 4 employees to 400 employees, like seeing every stage of a company go through and having this largely remote company and all of that. You learn a lot of different things, and then you go and start a new company, and it's like, okay, here's all of the things I can extract from that and then try to implement in the new company so we don't hit a lot of the worst of those pains, right? And I think largely we haven't. And then there's new challenges, which is starting in a new country that you've never started a company before in, and having 90% of your workforce being in this new country, right? And that's 9 time zones away. And so I think there's new challenges sort of in that sphere as well. And being in a completely different realm, right? Being in ed tech, essentially, as opposed to pure software development. We were software developers writing tools for software developers. We knew exactly what was generally wanted, whereas language learners are all over the map. And I know what I want when I'm learning a language. I don't know what everybody wants when they're learning a language, and so that's a little bit more difficult. And I'm not a teacher, and so I didn't, as a software developer, we knew this is the thing to build and we'll be happy. As a language learner, we also have to build tools for language teachers, and we're not language teachers, and so we have to collaborate with language teachers and say, how do you actually teach language in a good way, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's all over the map. It's a totally different company, but I think from a corporate standpoint, it is nice to have been through it before and be like, we know the big things to avoid and the big things, like what you put in place in order to avoid those things, like management, like how to do remote work properly, I mean, there's 100 different things probably. But that's, I think, the biggest thing, right, is having been through it before versus not having been through it before. And then also, GitHub was essentially profitable from day one, and we had no capital, like we never really raised capital. And Chatterbug, we come from this, exit for the most part, and so we can have the vision and be able to self-fund it to some degree and not have to worry quite as much about the timeline that it takes to get there. And so that changes perspective as well.
I just wanted to add very quickly that I totally agree. Like, it's going through it once, like you learn what not to do. This is why when people come to me and they say, hey, should I join a startup, or should I create my own startup, or should I go work for a bigger company? Like, what should I do? For, it's often young people, maybe right out of school. I will often say, join a startup if you want, that's amazing. Start a company if you want, that's also amazing. But there's also a lot of value in working for other companies. And the reason why is because you learn a lot of what you don't like. You learn a lot of what doesn't work. you learn a lot about what kind of person you don't want to be and how you don't want to run a company. And all of those negative experiences are very valuable. And then when it's time to run your own company, you can go into it and you say, okay, so first of all, I'm not going to do all of those things that my previous bosses and previous companies taught me to never do. And that puts you very far ahead. But there's a place that's it's hard to get to until you run your own company. Then you really see some things and you learn some things. And if you ever do it again, then you're much better able to do that. And so if for any of you are here thinking about starting your own companies, I'd say really think about your past experiences. All of these things are things that you already know. So if that's something for anyone in the audience who's feeling entrepreneurial, is draw on your own past experiences. There's a lot of value there.
One thing that's been amazing about starting this company is learning not just what not to do, but what to be deliberate about. So when I joined GitHub, this is something that's very personal to me, but I was, I think, around the 100th employee, 110 somewhere, and there were only 10 women at the company at the time. And it was never a deliberate choice. That's what happened. That's the community, the Ruby community that the company grew from. And there was never any intentionality behind we're going to make sure that we hire a diverse workforce or lots of women like that. And it was not a choice to be the way it was. It just wasn't something that people were necessarily deliberately thinking about until the company got to a certain size. And it was oh, let's correct for that, which GitHub did. And I was a part of that, and these two were as well. And it was great that we took the time. But starting a company from the beginning, you can be deliberate about those choices from the beginning, about not just who you hire, but where you look for candidates. And I'm so happy now to work for a startup that's from the beginning been 50% female, which is great. We have people from, I can't even count how many different nationalities we have on staff right now. Everyone speaks, maybe because it's a language learning company, but we have people that speak many different languages, and it's pretty amazing because we're serving such a broad audience to have such a broad diversity within the company. And I think that's something that we'll always be working on, and we set out to do that from the beginning, which is really nice, which is a really nice thing to get to do.
In a few words, summarize what would be maximum achievement for you personally that you could get to, or what you could achieve in the world with what you're building today with Chatterbug? What is it? What is it that if you look back in 20 years and you think about this awesome thing that we created here, what is it that people will talk about, and what will you have achieved?
I mentioned it before, but I would love to create 1 million jobs. I would love for 1 million people to be acting as language tutors and getting paid to do it anywhere in the world, from any country, as long as they have access to a computer and an internet connection that is sufficiently fast, and more people meet that criteria every day, that they have an opportunity to make money on the internet by doing something that they're already good at. And we can build that platform. So if Chatterbug can scale, that's what I'm after here. If we can take the positive ability to teach people languages in a really impressive, efficient, and enjoyable way, and scale that and make those jobs, then I would be very happy. That would be amazing to me.
Yeah, I'd say that mine is the mirror of that, which is I would love for 1 million people to learn a language to a sense of fluency, where they feel involved in a culture that they would not have had access to before, right? To fall in love with somebody that they wouldn't have been able to if they didn't speak the language, or to move to a country that they wouldn't have been able to be a successful participant in if they didn't know the language, or to empathize with a culture that they wouldn't have if they hadn't learned the language. I'd like to have 1 million people be able to do that, right? I mean, now it's funny, we have this certification system, and it's my favorite thing. It's my favorite stat, I think, in Chatterbug to check, is to see how many people have moved a CFR level, right? Have gone from A1 to A2, or A2 to B1, or B1 to B2 or something, and have gotten to the point where I know that they can have real conversations and make friends and go to dinner and watch TV and do stuff in a language that we can see sometimes they started at 0, right? And that is my favorite thing to see, who has actually learned a language in a way that maybe they couldn't have before, they wouldn't have before. Because that means that there's empathy there. That means that there's a connection to a culture that they wouldn't have had a connection to otherwise, or they couldn't in the same way. And so that's the stat I look at. That's the thing that I want to do in the world.
So I want all of the same things. Like I would love for Chatterbug someday to be synonymous with learning a language online, or even just learning a language, to have it just really be the best way to do it. But I'll add something that's a little bit more niche or a little bit more specific, which is we all come from GitHub, which has a very strong open source roots. And one of the things we've talked about is open sourcing the way that we create curriculum, so that at some point, I think Chatterbug will always offer popular languages that there's a wide demand to learn, like German and French and Spanish and English. But I would love someday for people to be able to use our platform to preserve and teach languages that don't get taught. Like somebody that is a specialist in some language, like a Native American language, for instance, that maybe isn't being taught in any school, that there's no way that you can learn it right now without spending specific time somewhere, but that they can take our curriculum tools that we have and create their own curriculum and then start teaching that using the Chatterbug platform. So this idea of sort of open sourcing the way languages learn and taught, like if we really have the best platform and the best way to do it, then we can use it not only to teach popular languages and to create jobs for anyone that wants to teach those, but also to preserve and continue languages that aren't currently being taught. So that's kind of my linguist nerd dream on top of everything that they just said.